Let us look at the trend analysis for Indian society section of GS paper 1. Now, the kind of syllabus breakup that has been given by UPSC, we will first look into the different aspects of this, and then I will further lead to syllabus deconstruction and the way we can approach it, what has been the marks distribution in the previous year questions and in the last 3 years specifically, and how do we analyze the trend or the kind of changes in the question pattern that has occurred, and how do we answer these questions. So to briefly look at it, we have the 4 different parts according to the UPSC syllabus: salient features of Indian society, diversity of India, role of women and women's organization, population and associated issues, poverty and developmental issues, urbanization problems and remedies, globalization and its impact, social empowerment, communalism, regionalism, and secularism. Now, we have deconstructed the syllabus in such a manner that we changed the themes for better understanding and for interconnectedness of the syllabus. So, how do we do that? Let us look at it. We will look at the features of the Indian society. I believe that this is a better way to understand the syllabus, because if there are questions which require interdimensionality or different kind of units of the syllabus coming together, then you wouldn't be at a loss of words. You will be able to understand how to interconnect the different parts. So the first and the foremost part over here is unity in diversity, or what we also call the salient features of the Indian society. As the word here suggests, that we are looking at the features of the Indian society. What marks the Indian society distinct and what makes it apart from the other societies? Over here, we look at the multilingualism, multiplurality, multi-ethnicity, different region, religion, language, culture, ethnicities, and all of these features, which goes to show how the Indian society is marked by a sense of pluralism, by a sense of diversity. Now, the pulse of this section is mostly positive. We try to look at the uniqueness in the culture of the society and what are the ways in which there are characteristic features which are able to which we are able to understand our culture through. That is the first unit. Then we look at the let us say the processes which lead to a change in this unit of features. Over here, UPSC has spoken of urbanization, has given urbanization and globalization as separate parts in the syllabus, right? But why are we looking at it in this manner? Because it allows us to ensure a procedural method of approach. Now, the processes of urbanization and globalization have an impact on the India's cultural unity and on the sense of the diverse activities, the pluralism that India is known for, the symptomatic features, right? What is the process of urbanization and globalization about? Urbanization refers to the process in which the area tends to change in character. There's a transition of the society from rural to urban areas. It is marked by about the total number of people that are living within that area and the density, the population density of that area, and most importantly, the mode of production, which goes beyond the rural agricultural sustenance mode of production to incorporate industrialization, to incorporate different capitalist pursuits and ventures. So in this manner, there is a change or transition in the society. This change is marked by these processes. So these are 3 topics of the syllabus, which we have divided in this manner. Okay. Then we can look at what is the threat to the society because of this transition and how is the original features under threat. Threat or challenges to the unity of the nation. Okay. In terms of threat, what we can look at is the problem of regionalism, secularism and communalism. Okay, easy to understand. We know what are the previously organized ways in which the Indian society functioned and how it has transitioned to the present society. It retains certain features, essentially unity and diversity in salient or unique features of the society. Then there are certain processes which the Indian society has undergone in terms of urbanization and globalization, which render a change in the character of the society. It could be now more composite, it could be multicultural, but also incorporating urban ways of lifestyle, incorporating even more cultural plurality, even more globalized sense of identity. And because of these processes and further on, and there has been a change in the character. Now what are the threats or the challenges arising in this kind of a situation? Because of the plurality, regionalism, secularism and communalism. Regionalism refers to the process in which we see that there is an innate sense of attachment, of belongingness, of love, of shared unity associated to a particular region, to a particular community. In this specific sense, we're talking about the geographical region, the region of nativity. Then the problem of communalism and secularism as religious perversion. Secularism is not a problem. More or less, secularism can be understood as distinction of religion from the public and the private life, separating the church from the state. So in that manner, secularism can be seen as a challenge also, because is it going to always have a positive impact on the unity, or it is going to dismantle the culture of the Indian society in the name of a foreign concept of secularism? So there are different dimensions to all the three concepts of regionalism, secularism and communalism. Communalism is a process in which there is a political backing to this kind of a religious perversion, which goes to state that one religion is superior to the other. So majoritarian versus minoritarian religion, the governance, domination and authoritarian regime of religion over every walk of life. Sorry. Okay. Then we can look at what are the components of the population that undergo changes. There is a process of interaction associated to this. Here we can include population dynamics, population study, the National Family Health Survey 5 is of utmost importance, along with Census 2011. Okay. Population dynamics, and with this we can also briefly look at the issue of demographic dividend, which is gaining token of importance. And lastly, we can incorporate the conscientiousness of individuals, meaning how do we empower different sections of the society social security and justice, the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, children, women, senior citizens, disabled or differently abled population, LGBTQ community, poor sections of the society, poverty and development, and social security concerns. So the reason that I have deconstructed the syllabus in this manner is for easy understanding as to what is expected out of Indian society section in the GS1 paper. Now, I will just again give you a line of interconnectedness over here. We are looking at the essential foundational character or the basic principles of the Indian society in salient features, which we can understand through features of the Indian society. The pulse of this section is mostly positive, meaning we are trying to look at the unity of plurality, of multiculturalism. We are trying to look at that binding fabric, that thread which binds the sections of the society together. There could be questions in this section also which talk about what are the threats and challenges, which basically goes to show that two different parts of the section of the syllabus can be interconnected. There could be what is the challenges thrown by secularism to the concept of cultural plurality. What are the challenges thrown by regionalism to the concept of religious, to the concept of regional diversity of composite cultures, right? So culture remains to be a basic idea of the feature of the Indian society, and by and large how there is multiculturalism through the existence of different material and non-material components of culture. Then there are processes the Indian society has undergone change, which have rendered a change in the character of the society as well, which goes to show that urbanization and globalization have an impact on the nature of the society. Now, this section of the syllabus also has a bearing on the features part. So, you will see questions which ask you on how urbanization has had an impact on, let us say, women in the Indian society, or how globalization has an impact on the culture of the Indian society. There are a lot of questions which we will discuss in the coming few minutes on how there has been intersectionality of the syllabus. Then we are looking at threats and challenges. A certain number of questions have been asked relevant to secularism, regionalism and communalism, which are by far the kind of threats that we are looking at given by the syllabus differentiation. And in terms of components of the society, since these three are interlinked, therefore I drew them in concentric, now not circles, but what's supposed to be circles. Then components of the society in terms of who are the people, what interaction they have with each other, what that interaction leads to the formation of a stabilized structure or continued repeated patterned interactions. And lastly, the conscientiousness or empowerment of the different social classes such as the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, the disabled, senior citizens, young children, women, LGBTQ community. Over here, we also include poverty and multidimensionality of poverty, developmental indicators, and how do we incorporate or facilitate the process of development. In these many sections and in this kind of an interrelatedness, we can easily understand what the syllabus is demanding from you. The idea is to see that the Indian society is unique because of the features, but there are ways in which there has been a change in the character or disintegration of the society. There have been challenges. So how do we approach them? Now, in the terms of approaching the syllabus, the first question that we have is, what should our resources be? Where should we study from? It is important to understand that Indian society is not about gathering data. It is not about accumulating sources, books. Rather, what is it about? How do we approach the syllabus? It has to be a slow and gradual conceptual understanding. We need to have a conceptual clarity. You can start with the NCERT books for this, because they give you a definition of these features, a basic preliminary understanding. From standard 8 onwards, we can look at history and civics books. History is mostly important for a particular section of the syllabus, such as Unit 1, Unity in Diversity, and then also for women's movements. But by and large, we can look at the civics part of it. Then from 11th and 12th standard, sociology books are also important. It goes to, it goes without saying that people with sociology optional will have an edge in this regard because of the kind of syllabus that is overlapping. This is relatively easier than sociology, but there is an overlap of definition, foundational ideas, and the principle of India's culture and structure. So 11th and 12th standard sociology should suffice. Do not dwell into those kind of thick sociological books such as Anthony Giddens or George Ritzer and so on. No need to approach all those books. No need to make heavy notes. The syllabus is relatively easy. It's palatable. It can be broken down into different components through video lectures, through understanding of basic primary books, and couple it with analytical clarity. And how do we approach that? How do we analyze things? And what are the sources? Newspapers are the best source for this. You can also look into magazines. Yojana, Kurukshetra, EPW, Down to Earth. Again, you don't need to go into a list of magazines for this. Okay, just right. Newspapers, Mint happens to be a good paper in terms of the analysis required for the Indian section of the syllabus. Also, the Mint has a front page of statistical data that they come up with, which can help you organize your answers, right? And then the Hindu editorials are equally good enough. There are also articles coming up with gist given towards the left side of the article lately, which is a way forward in understanding what is the basic idea behind the article. And then also in the Indian Express, we have certain good articles which tend to analyze. So look at the editorial section basically, and look at the front page of the Mint paper, which is giving you a statistical idea. Apart from that, you need to have certain factual information at hand in terms of the schemes, in terms of initiatives. For this, you can also look at compilations. Save yourself some time and refer to resources such as the Economic Survey, the National Family Health Survey, very important for this section of the society. And you can also take note of, certain kind of PIB articles that are there, right? Do not multiply your sources. Do not make it extravagant. The idea over here is to keep the sources minimalist, to get an idea of conceptual, analytical, and factual clarity. For factual clarity, you need to have an idea of what are the schemes associated, especially for the conscientiousness part or the social empowerment, as to what are the various schemes in which through which we can lead to empowerment of different sections of the society. Then for conceptual clarity, basic books, concepts such as secularism, what is communalism, what is regionalism, or what is urbanization, what impact it has on the Indian society, you can get a good idea from the NCERT books itself, because this section does not require expert knowledge. It requires basic awareness. Over a period of time, that is what you will develop, basic awareness of this. So there is no need to pile up books and read it over a period of time. It can be done in a very small period of time itself. Analytical clarity you can arrive through newspapers, magazines, and surveys, right? So this is by far the kind of resources that we need to look at when we are preparing for this section of the syllabus. But beyond that, what I would also suggest is for you to take note of the latest challenges that are happening in other spheres. For instance, cryptocurrency. You would be reading about it from the economic perspective. gig economy. These are areas which you do not think have a direct bearing on the Indian society, but the 2021 is, a case in point over here. It goes to show how contradictory that approach is. So your awareness needs to get generated in the sense that there has to be a multi-dimensionality. You need to see what impact that every society's institutions have, right? So how do we ensure that? A brief way in which I would like to do it is by understanding the society, such as this Trinitarian model or a triangle kind of a thing. It constitutes of components or people. This we can understand as social groups or sections. There is a culture that is coming out of interaction between different groups of people. And this repeated interaction leads to a structure. Repeated patterned interaction leads to a structure, which can be understood through institutions. Family, marriage, religion, politics. Okay, we need to understand this multi-dimensionality. For instance, if we are looking at economic institutions, changes in the economic institution, cryptocurrency, gig economy, liberalization, globalization, that is an economic institution, but it has a bearing on the interaction. It has a bearing on other institutions such as family and marriage. It has a bearing on the India's culture and tradition. And we can also look at how it affects different sections of the society. So this multidimensionality is an approach to Indian society. In the very early sections when it was introduced, in 2015 or 2016 paper, you don't see that intersectionality, interdimensionality and multiple dimensions. But lately, as the trend shows that there has been increasing interdependence. The questions are not straight, direct forward from one section of the syllabus. They are rather a culmination of different sections. They are an interspersing of different sections. So for that, it's imperative for you to understand how to divide the section, what is the interrelation between different sections of the syllabus, and how do we approach this. This is a sort of an attitudinal method, a behavioral way of analysis, and you need to develop it over a period of time. Whenever you read articles, it should click behind your mind that what are the stakeholders of this particular move? Who are the people being affected? How does it affect different social institutions? How does it affect the kind of interaction between different social groups? This needs to be a broad, let us say, an underlying thought that needs to run throughout all of your preparation, or all the more important, and how can it be improved with the help of newspaper articles, because they bring out this multidimensionality. Okay, so now let us look at the marks distribution. (2015, 2016). I'm going to do a 5-year distribution over here just for your understanding and to be able to get a idea of the trend. Then we will discuss the last 3 years and questions of 2021 with particular importance, right? Unit wise, unit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have divided it according to the units we have discussed. Unit 1 is unity in diversity. Unit 2 is threats or challenges, secularism, regionalism, communalism. Social empowerment. called the conscientiousness part. 4 is urbanization, and 5 is globalization. According to the UPSC syllabus. Now, there are two ways in which we have understood the syllabus. One is how I deconstructed it to get a composite picture. 2 is the syllabus that is given by UPSC. So, this is a broad division of that syllabus, and in this manner, I have divided the kind of questions that have been asked. So, in 2015, one question was asked from Unit 1, one question was asked from Unit 3, and two questions were asked from Unit 3 and 2 from Unit 5. Then in 2016, we have one question from here, 2 from here. Okay, then 1 and 1 from here. Actually, I'll just erase this. And in 2017, 2, 1, 1 and 1. And in 2018, 3, 2, 2, and lastly 1 question. Okay. Okay, so we see by and large the number of questions which were initially asked were stable at 5, but in 2018 we see a total of 8 questions being asked with heavy reliance on Unit 1 and equitable distribution in Unit 2 and Unit 3. So in the early years there wasn't much emphasis being given to urbanization and globalization. Emphasis was given to secularism and social empowerment. Okay, and Unit 1, right? So these 3 units were given excessive emphasis in the first couple of years, and we see that the number of questions eventually increased. Now let us understand how the other 3 years have fared. I'll just erase this part. From 2019, 20, 21, because this is going to give us a picture about how we need to approach the syllabus now. Right? 2019, 2020 and 2021. Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, Unit 4 and Unit 5, and total number of questions. In 2019, we have 3 questions from Unit 1, 1 question and 2 questions from Unit 3, no questions from 4 and 5. If that is right, yes. Total 6. Then in 2020, we have 2, 2 and 2, right? 6 questions. In 2021, we have 6 questions. So there has been a stable trend in the number of questions that have been asked, a slight increase from the previous 3-4 years that we have seen, where there were repeatedly about 5 questions asked. But the trend has also changed, as they have in the last 2 years, we see that questions have been incorporated from urbanization and globalization, and Unit 1 has seen a stable number of questions. So unity in diversity happens to be by far the most important unit, as all of the years we have seen, with the exception of 2016, there has been at least 1 to 2 questions from the first unit. Then the second unit, there has been low relevance for the second unit, but we cannot entirely ignore it, especially because UPSC asks questions which are interrelated to the current affairs. So we see secularism, regionalism, communalism, threats and challenges to the diversity of Indian society has seen a significant rise even in terms of the analysis based on current affairs. So we can definitely expect questions from this section. Social empowerment, extremely important, as we can see the number of questions that have been asked in the last 3 years at 2 questions each per year. And this is also a wide range, in the sense within this unit of the syllabus there are many subunits, social empowerment of different sections of the society. So the scope of a question being asked is diverse. It's not a repetitive element, right? Different questions can be asked pertaining to different sections of the society. So we see this remains to be equally important. And in the last two units, as I have mentioned, urbanization and globalization, increasing importance is being given. Expect at least one question from this, especially with reference to 2021. I will tell you why this is important. So we see about 50 to 75 marks are being asked from this section, but furthermore this is also important because you can also tackle your essay related questions with ease. In terms of your preparation, it can be like hitting 2 birds with 1 stone, or if that's a derogatory proverb, what we can look at is how we can tackle different sections of the syllabus by studying it for once, right? Now I will try to look into the different units with a little more clarity. Okay. Unit 1, salient features. Let us see whether our preparation needs to be static or dynamic for this section. We have already seen that in terms of relevance, this is a highly relevant section, because every year bearing 2016, we have seen that questions from this section have been repeatedly asked. There is an excessive reliance on culture, and also questions based on the caste system have been asked lately. Also, in terms of how the caste system as an essential or salient feature of the Indian society exists even in the modern contemporary time. However, the nature of that system has changed. So what bearing or what implication it has on diversity. Salient features refers to unique features. So the pulse of this section is mostly positive. So we need to be aware, and even when you read your basic NCRTs, you will be able to tackle the basic questions, static questions. However, UPSC is no longer asking only static questions. There is a dynamism associated with it. For instance, the static question would have been analyze the caste system as a unique institution of the Indian subcontinent. However, the dynamic part would be the caste system is changing in its form, but it hasn't entirely been excluded or been banished from the Indian society. Or what are the contemporary features of the caste system? What are the new forms associated to the caste system? So in that manner, we see that the relevance of the static part remains to be high, but there has to be a interrelation of the static and the dynamic part. We have to see what are the basic institutions of the Indian society, but what are the dynamic changes to these basic institutions. Even language, for instance. Earlier a static question would have been how describe or analyze or comment how India is a multilingual society, or what are the cultural variations. But now there is a further syllabus has been broken down into further micro units, and now the question would be, for instance, what are the digital initiatives taken for enhancing the linguistic pluralism in Indian society. So you see, dynamic features are closely relevant. This is a very important subsection of the syllabus. The relevance of this section is extremely high, and we need to incorporate it both in terms of the dynamic and relevant features. Especially in terms of caste, culture and tradition, these aspects have to be taken note of, right? Then we can look at unit 2. Okay, before I go into unit 2, there's also the role of women's organization, which has been asked by UPSC. Again, I need to put it under a separate heading just for the sake of understanding UPSC syllabus. The relevance is relatively low because static questions have been asked, role of organization, but dynamic relevance can be high, even though question has also been asked in this regard as to how women's organization have stood the test of time and space. So I would say it has a low relevance because the kind of questions that can be asked from this section are low. However, it's imperative for you to understand this section, to go through the movements. It's very easy to memorize what the organizations are, what they stand for. You can divide it into the different phases of the organization, but relevance could be more on the dynamic part. That is a section which hasn't been focused on in the PYQs. So there is a scope for asking a question. And how do we look at the dynamic part in terms of the contemporary ways in which the women's organization have fared. So you can look at the leadership, mobilization, the resource part, the kind of challenges that they face, the kind of intersectionality of the issues or the problems or the objectives. Then you can give different ideas of how the Pinjara Tod movement, the Me Too movement are a way in which mobilization occurs in the contemporary world, and how the digital world, how the virtual digital space plays an equally important role in the women's organizations. And way forward can be how do we provide allocation of certain facilities or institutional support in this regard. Okay. Then we can also look at population dynamics. Why is it important? I would say the relevance is medium to high because of the statistical surveys that goes to show how it's more static in that sense, but it's also static because of the nature of this, right? In terms of how the National Family Health Survey provides us with statistics, which goes to show what is the current scenario of the population dynamic. So there is a static part to it in the sense of the numerical ideas. It's not static meaning fixed, but something that can be easily understood and how do you approach it. Dynamic part requires you to have an analysis, a better analysis. Static part does not require from you that kind of a in-depth analysis. It's more of understanding the factual aspects. So this has certain factual aspects to it, with relation to the demographic dividend, with relation to the sex ratio or the nutritional developmental indicators and so on. The questions that can be asked from this are mostly medium to high in the sense especially for the demographic indicators, especially for the NFHS 5 and the new resources that we have come up with to analyze the population trend. Then we can look at poverty and development. Now I'm going by the UPSC syllabus over here, but do keep in mind how they are all interlinked when you're studying your subject. Poverty and development, development could have certain questions. Poverty, the relevance is low because again, it's more or less static in the kind of dimensionality, multidimensionality has been already asked in terms of poverty. But the dynamic questions that can be asked are definitely high. Learning poverty, for instance, or how do we interlink it? By and in itself, the unit of the syllabus has low relevance. But if we look at the dynamic section, there can be certain questions asked, such as learning poverty. So there has been interdimensionality that we can look at and emphasize on. Then Okay, urbanization and globalization as processes. As we have seen, fewer number of questions were asked in comparison to all the previous years. However, 2021 saw a revival of that sorts. So I would say the relevance is medium to high rather than low. And why is it? Is that because it's not going to be asked from the static portion, but the dynamic part of it. Dynamic in the sense it's going to be interconnected. As I have mentioned, there could be relevance of urbanization and globalization in terms of the different social groups. So there is going to be interconnectedness of the syllabus. Dynamic questions can be asked, such as the gig economy, cryptocurrency, or COVID migration. There are dynamic aspects of urbanization and globalization which you need to focus more on. And even for the dynamic part, what I would like to include is that you need to have a statistical base. You need to have a static component for that as well. It would provide more edge to your answer if you're able to incorporate what are the latest dimensions or the surveys or the statistical part of it. And along with that, you give a dynamic analysis, analysis which is multi-dimensional, which is incorporating different sections of the syllabus. And lastly, we can include social empowerment. It's extremely high in relevance. Questions can be asked from this section, which are a combination of static and dynamic, and interrelation and impact of one section on the other. And lastly, we look at communalism, secularism. Although so far the question, I'm just erasing it out now. So far the questions that have been asked from secularism, communalism and regionalism have been low, but the relevance is high, with keeping in mind the contemporary changes in this regard. Okay. So daily we see newspaper articles, we see editorials which give us a picture of what are the ideas or concepts which are latest, which are being discussed. So analysis component within the newspaper itself can give you a reflection of what the future demands could be in terms of the question paper, setting up the question paper, right? Now, what we can do now is look into 2021 questions and 2020 questions, right? 2019, 2020 and 2021. The last 3 years, questions that have been asked: unity in diversity, one of the favorites, but also lately more emphasis being laid on urbanization and industrialization and globalization. And we can also expect questions from secularism on the basis of this. And interconnectedness is the most important point I want to make over here in terms of trend analysis. Okay. So in 2019, questions from culture, secularism, women's organization, and population dynamics were asked. And in 2020, we see caste, pandemic, regionalism. Then culture and education. And in 2021, we see questions being asked from gig economy, IT industry, cryptocurrency. And population education, and tribal indigenous knowledge. Okay. The reason why I have laid out these 3 years is because they are particularly more important in terms of your trend analysis. So we see from section 1 in terms of culture, in terms of caste and culture, questions tend to get asked repeatedly, right? Unity and diversity is important. However, the kind of nature of questions that is being asked has changed. In 2021, they asked how the tribal knowledge and the mainstream knowledge are to be looked at. So there has been interconnectedness of the static and the dynamic part of different components within the syllabus. 2021 was a game changer for Indian society. Not a game changer, but in the sense the kind of questions which are asked were entirely different from the previous static questions. So there is increasing element of dynamic areas in the questions that are being asked. You can have an idea of what are the tribal groups. Earlier, you would have basically seen what is the tribal population, what are the characteristics, what are the problems, what are the challenges. But the nature of questions changed with 2021, where we're looking at the mainstream knowledge and the tribal knowledge and how they could be at loggerheads or how we can incorporate both. So there is a sense of analysis. It is based on your own developmental understanding of the Indian society, coupled with a sense of conceptual clarity as to what is mainstream knowledge, what is tribal knowledge. So interconnectedness tends to become extremely important. For caste and culture, 2020 questions that were asked in this regard, the relevance of caste in 21st century, as I mentioned, there is a dynamic approach to the different units of the syllabus. Earlier, they would have asked more of the static portion. Now it is more dynamic. So keep in mind what are the implications challenges of one section on the other and change in nature due to this or arising out of this. Okay, these are 3 areas which we can look into when we're looking at the dynamic component of it. And then we can look at how pandemic was also impact of regionalism on the society. Earlier questions were not asked, but this is again a dynamic question of regionalism, and pandemic is a current affairs based, direct based question. Then in 2021, we see crypto is directly based on the current affairs, and gig economy also is closely linked to the pandemic. So you see there has been an not the pandemic, but there has been an interdependence of the units also in terms of the components that are dynamic, are more in nature. And population education, also IT sector, all 3 of these are current affairs, all 3 of these are dynamic, but the questions that have been asked are interrelated. Impact of the IT sector on, let us say, family as an institution. Earlier it was general impact of IT sector, but now there is particular micro unit interconnection that is happening. Then population education as a way forward for dealing overpopulation. Earlier it would be challenges of population, of overpopulation, problems occurring due to overpopulation. Now we go one step ahead to include the initiatives of population education. So micro units are being emphasized more. It is definitely an improvement of the syllabus deconstruction and the kind of questions that are being asked. So in this manner, what we can take note from here is that you need to focus more on the dynamic parts, more on the micro unit of the syllabus and the interconnectedness of these micro units. So this is something that you can develop over a period of time. As you read your newspaper articles, you go through analysis, magazines tend to come up with interesting interconnectedness. A lot of newspaper articles are actually they give you a glimpse of what are the different interconnectedness. For instance, one article was published recently, I think in the Hindu, where they located how the impact of the pandemic on the tribal section of the population was positive, contrary to the beliefs that existed on how pandemic affected every section of the society negatively. So, this is an interesting interconnectedness between current happening and between social institutions as a static part of the syllabus. Look out for these interconnectedness, but over a period of time, you can develop it on your own as you go through the syllabus. So, now I will erase it briefly. Okay, and we can come into answer writing part of it. You're likely to be asked a 10 or a 15 marker, 150 to 250 words. And if we look at the society section of essays, again, extremely important because at least 1 or 2 questions can be asked from this domain. For answer writing, your basic foundational concepts need to be clear, which means that your definitions have to be clear. NCERT can help you with that. Along with that, you can obviously keep a dictionary with you whenever you're reading your newspaper articles. Also, the newspaper articles also come up with a lot of analysis of the terminology. Lately, I think even the Hindu has been coming up with these specific articles on the terminology that has been used, or the kind of new terms we can associate in terms of the contemporary significance on how they are taking a token. Okay, for instance, COVID orphans is a term that you can understand. Over here, I'll just give you a brief idea. So there could be a question on how the problem of COVID orphans has come up and what are the challenges, what is the way forward, right? What are the components to your answer? This depends on the demands of the question, but briefly, what could be the components? It could be a basic concept, problems, challenges, schemes, initiatives, way forward. By and large, these are certain areas that you can include in your analysis. And another important thing over here is interconnections, because your question itself lately is based on your interconnections, right? Develop this analytical approach while you read your newspaper, magazines, reports, editorials, okay? And you can aid it with test series where the probable questions are outlined for you by the institute, okay? And another important component over here is the kind of examples that you include, especially when we're talking about, let us say, a section like secularism, secularization, communalism. Your approach needs to be neutral. We cannot give our personal biases, stereotypical ideas and beliefs when we are quoting certain examples. Keep aside your personal perception. Rely heavily on neutrality, on constitutional terminology, for instance, the constitutional debates that are there, judicial debates that are there, they tend to give you a picture of what is the basic constitutional framework that we follow in India and how can we go forward in approaching a certain organic sense of change to our to our laws, to our legal structure, right? That gives you an idea of different components of the Indian society itself. Okay. So by and large, these are the ways in which your answer writing can be taken forward, right? So we have tackled what are the resources, how do we deconstruct the syllabus, and what are the methods in which answer writing can be approached. This could be a general approach. To sum it up, try to look at the syllabus in terms of the micro units in terms of the interdependence of one unit on the other. Look at the relevance of implication of one unit over the other. And while you're preparing, try to incorporate your statistical data from surveys, from newspapers, and develop an analytical attitude by reading articles, by ensuring that there is a interconnectedness forming at the back of your head while you go through these articles. So that is all for the trend analysis, and with that we can wrap this section up.